So New World Aeternum's getting a brand new 10-man raid, and with that raid, we're going to get some new drops, some new gear, some new crafting items, and a whole lot more. This content is intended to be the hardest PvE content in the game, so we are going to go over everything we know about this raid so far. So the Hive of Gorgons is a 10-man in-game raid in New World Aeternum, and the raid is intended to be the pinnacle of PvE content in the game. It is going to be a step above mutators, and even though it's going to be similar to the Sandworm Trial, there are definitely going to be some more complex mechanics. There are 3 chapters to this raid, and each chapter contains its own section of enemies, a puzzle action sequence, and then a boss. So there's a total of 3 bosses within this raid versus just the 1 boss you fight in the Sandworm Trial. In this raid, there's also trash mobs and other puzzles you have to figure out along the way. So you're not just going into an arena and fighting 1 boss. You're going to work your way all the way through the raid, fighting your way through 3 different bosses. So from the Hive of Gorgons Raid, you can also obtain gear score 725 gear. You can obtain 3 new perks from this raid as well, 1 for weapons, 1 for armor, and 1 for accessories, and these perks are exclusive to the raid. We'll talk a little bit more about those here in just a moment. And along with the gear and perks, you can also find special crafting material that is utilized to craft gear score 725 gear. We'll jump into that in more detail here in just a moment as well. So even though this raid is intended for 10 players, you can open it and attempt it with a minimum of 6 players. The raid is located in the southern part of Cutlass Keys. It's just above the Barnacles and Black Powder Expedition, and you can enter via the raid entrance, or you can use the activities function within the game. Then once you're inside of the raid, you're going to be encountering Angry Earth type enemies. So these enemies are weak to slash and fire damage. And if you're new to the game or coming to the game on console and you're not sure how the damage type versus mob types work, you can check the full list of weaknesses for all enemy types by going to studioloot.com and checking the damage type versus mob type chart. I'll make sure to link that down in the description below. But essentially every mob type in the game is weak to some sort of damage. So also whenever you go into this raid, you're going to make sure you are equipped with your infused Angry Earth coatings and your infused Angry Earth ward potions in order to dish out more damage and mitigate additional damage from the Angry Earth enemies, much like you would in any other expedition or mutation. But this is something that you can do ahead of time right now to start preparing for this raid whenever it drops on the 15th. Just go ahead and stockpile up on those coatings and those potions or those ward potions so that you can be prepared to run this raid. You also want to make sure that you have those Angry Earth combat trophies active and in your house before you go attempt this raid so you can dish out more damage. You definitely want to have some honing stones on hand as well and the appropriate stat food. So let's talk a little bit about the loot that you're going to be getting from this raid. We'll start with the weapons. So there is an artifact hammer that you can get from this raid. It's called the Trisna. I think that's how you say it. It's TRSNA. This artifact hammer comes with Magnify. It's going to have Consume, which is 25% lifesteal versus knockdown foes. It has lifestealing on it, which heals you for 7.1% of the damage you deal. And it has Trenchant Recovery on there, which heals you for 25% of the damage dealt by melee attacks. Then it comes with a random perk. And we'll talk about how you can adjust that perk a little bit later and how you can increase the gear score of these artifacts up to maximum as well. But this hammer drops from the second boss in the raid called Typhon. I think that's how you say it. I'm sure I'm butchering all of these names, but Typhon, Typhon. It's the second boss in the raid. You can also get what's called the Gorgon's weapons. So these will drop up to gear score 725. It's every weapon in the game, and they just have random perks on there. So much like other mutations or other expeditions, they drop just gear it's not really considered named gear because it doesn't come set with stats. It's all random perks, but they do drop up to 725, and you can look forward to getting those drops from Brood Mother Medusa, which is the last boss in this raid. And then we have the named or the legendary items. They're called the Hoplite items that come from the raid. These also drop from Brood Mother Medusa, again the final boss in the raid. And these come locked with 2 perks. They have a gem socket, and then they have a random perk slot on there as well. And I'll make sure to link a guide down in the description below so you can see all of the perks on all these weapons. Don't really want to go through all of them in this video because we'd be here for a long time. But a lot of them come with like refreshing move and then a weapon perk. And some of them come now with the new perk that you can get from the raid. It's called Disdained Infliction. We'll talk a little bit more about the perks you can get and how you get them here in just a moment, but you can get what's called the Hoplite set. There's some decent weapons within this set, but again, I'll make sure to link this down in the description below so you can take a look at the entire set of Hoplite weapons. And then on to the armor. So you can get another artifact piece out of this raid, a piece of armor. It's a medium leg wear. They're called the Azoth Conductors. So these come with Magnify. They have a special perk called Magician's Boon. And if you're in medium equip weight, you deal 15% more elemental damage, which could be nice for some builds. There's refreshing on these, and then health, and then of course your random perk in an empty gem slot. And the Azoth Conductors drop from the first boss in the raid, whose name is Echidna. I'm sure I'm butchering these, but Echidna, we're going to go with that. And then we have the Gorgon's armor set. This is much like the Gorgon's weapons we talked about earlier. These just drop with random perks, but it's gear that you can get up to 725 gear score, all random perks, and you can get these in light, medium, and heavy. And you can get those gear drops from the second boss in the raid called Typhon. And then we have the named armor set. It is called the Hoplite armor set, much like the Hoplite weapons. This also comes in light, medium, and heavy. So the light set is going to drop with Enchanted Ward and Refreshing as the locked perks, except for on the shoes. You're going to get one of the special perks called Hasted Vigor on the shoes, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. The medium set comes mixed with Enchanted Ward and Health, and Enchanted Ward and Refreshing on some of the pieces, and then the boots also have Hasted Vigor on those. And then the heavy set comes with Enchanted Ward and Health on all of your sets, except for the boots, which have Hasted Vigor and Health on those. And of course, all of these have Magnify as the attribute. And then we have the jewelry. We have one more artifact coming out of this raid, and it's called the Elemental Band. It is a ring, and it has Elemental Affinity as the artifact perk. So whenever you hit a target with an elemental damage attack, and this does not trigger off of dot or attunement attacks, you gain 4% in power for 6 seconds. It also comes with Keen Awareness and Hardy on the ring, and that drops from Brood Mother Medusa, the final boss in the raid. Along with the Elemental Band, we have the Hoplite jewelry. So we have the Hoplite amulet. This is the named jewelry you can get, much like the Hoplite weapons and the Hoplite armor. We have Unimpeded on the Hoplite amulet, which is the third special perk you can get out of this raid. And it also comes with health and then a random perk, and that drops from the first boss in the raid, Echidna. We have the Hoplite ring that comes with Bloodletting and Hardy. Then we have the Hoplite earring that comes with Refreshing Toast and Refreshing, and all of those drop from Echidna. Then we also have, much like the weapons and the armor, following that same pattern, we have the Gorgon set of jewelry. All of these, of course, are random perks, just like they are for the weapons and the armor, and these drop from Echidna as well. All right, so now let's talk about these exclusive raid gear perks. There are 3 of them in total, and we mentioned them whenever we were going through the gear, but let's dive into them now. So we have Hasted Vigor. This is an armor perk. You can put this on your chest, your helmet, your gloves, your pants, and your shoes, and it comes under the label of Damage Absorb. So if you're unaware of how the gear works in this game, every perk has a specific label tied to it. You can only put one perk within that label on a piece of gear. So whenever you're trying to build out a set, you're crafting a set of gear, just keep that in mind. So if you have Hasted Vigor on your gear, what happens is that the potency of incoming damage over time effects is reduced by 7% per armor piece with this perk. And taking a hit while inflicted with a dot will grant 10% haste for 5 seconds. And the way that you get this perk is that it drops on some of the Hoplite armor pieces and some of the Gorgon's pieces. But you can salvage those Hoplite or Gorgon's armor pieces to have a chance at obtaining the crafting mod. And the crafting mod for this particular perk is called Natural Finish. So that's what you're looking for. So you're going to see a pattern with all of these raid gear perks. They drop on the weapons, the armor, or the jewelry. And whenever you get those, you can either keep them or you can salvage them. Whenever you salvage them, you have an opportunity or a chance to obtain the craft mod that you can use to then craft this perk onto your gear. So the next perk is called Unimpeded. So if you have this perk on your gear, the potency of slows on you are reduced by 30% as long as you have not been exhausted within the last 10 seconds. This can only go on an amulet, and the exclusive label for this is debuff duration. So following suit with Hasted Vigor, this, if you can only use it on an amulet, it's only going to drop on an amulet. So it drops on the Hoplite and Gorgon amulets, and then you can salvage these amulets to obtain the crafting mod, which is called Silver Oil. Then we have the last perk that comes out of the raid. It's called Disdained Infliction. So if you have this on your weapons, and this can go on any weapon in the game, the potency of outgoing dots are increased by 15%. Hitting a target inflicted by your dots will extend the duration of them by 5% with a 1-second cooldown. And then in PvE only, you deal a plus 5% base damage against hostile AI inflicted with dots. And we have another video later on going over these perks if you guys are interested, diving into a little bit more detail with them. For this video, I just wanted to go over an overview of everything you could get out of the raid. So following suit with the other two perks, this is going to drop on the weapons, the Hoplite and the Gorgon's weapons. And of course, you salvage those weapons, have a chance to get in the craft mod. And the craft mod is called Poisonous Nectar for the Disdained Infliction perk. So now this is where things get a little bit more interesting, is with the crafting material that comes out of this raid. So you can complete the raid once per day and get 3 chromatic seals. Nothing really new there, but you can also get these things called Hive of Gorgon tokens. You can get 10 of them every time you complete the raid. So this is a little weird to me. I don't know why they did this, because these Hive of Gorgons tokens are simply materia. So if you've played the game before, if you're familiar with how materia works, you finish a expedition and you're rewarded with a thing, with a crafting material called materia. In the case of finishing the raid, you're rewarded with these Gorgon tokens. If you've never played the game before, or if this is your first time, or you don't know what materia is, basically what happens is whenever you complete a expedition, a mutation, you will receive materia. You can then use that materia, save it up, and then you can use it as at a gypsum kiln to craft the named items that come out of that particular expedition. So if you're trying to find a particular item in an expedition and you're just having really bad luck getting that item to drop, you can run the expedition over and over and over, save up enough materia, and then you can just go craft that item outright. It's the same exact thing with these Hive of Gorgons tokens. I don't know why they named them tokens and not materia, but they did. So you can get these Hive of Gorgons tokens. You get 10 of them every time you beat the raid, and you can use those to craft the Hoplite gear. And then we have what's called a Gorgonite inductor. You're going to get one of these whenever you complete the raid. And this is crafting material that's going to be used to upgrade artifacts to 725. You can also use a coconut from the PvP zone to do the same exact thing. So you can use either or. But what happens is that whenever you use this item, you can upgrade your artifacts all the way to max, and you can use this to adjust your perks on that artifact if it's at max and you want to switch up your perk. Exactly how we've been able to do before, only you need this now to do it for 725 items. You also use this Gorgonite inductor to craft what's called Gorgon Essence. So a Gorgon Essence is something that you're going to need in order to craft gear without obtaining a schematic from the raid. So you also get schematics from this raid whenever you complete certain aspects of the raid. You can get schematics for all armor pieces and weapons. And what a schematic is, it's a pattern that you can use to craft armor. If you have this pattern, you can just use a Gorgon's Eye outright, and a Gorgon's Eye is something we'll talk about here in just a moment. If you do not have this pattern, then you can only craft your gear by converting that Gorgon's Eye into what's called a Gorgon Essence. And in order to convert that Gorgon's Eye into a Gorgon's Essence, you are going to need the Gorgonite inductor. Gets a little confusing, I know, but that's how it works. So the raid also drops the Gorgon's Eye, which I just mentioned. It is a crafting material, and you're going to use this to craft 725 gear score gear. So again, if you have the schematic from the raid, you can just use the Gorgon's Eye and you can craft it outright. If you do not have a schematic and you're trying to craft 725 gear, you're going to need to have a Gorgon's Eye and a Gorgon inductor in order to convert those into a Gorgon Essence. You also need another crafting material, but the two main things you need are the Gorgon's Eye, the Gorgonite inductor, in order to craft that Gorgon Essence to be able to craft 725 gear score gear without using a schematic that you get from the raid. So now we're over here on YouTube on Nefisto's channel. I'll make sure to link this down in the description below, but this is a preview, a press preview event of the new raid. This is 43 minutes long. We're not going to watch all 43 minutes of this, but I just wanted to give you guys an idea of what you can expect from this raid. So whenever we go in here, you can see that we're basically, this whole first part of this is just clearing trash mobs. Essentially, you're going to run through here and clear a whole lot of trash mobs. And then whenever you get to a certain section after clearing trash mobs at the end of what they call a chapter, what's going to happen is you're going to have a puzzle. So right here, you're going to see a puzzle. This is the puzzle room. There's a platform here and there's another platform over on the other side. And what you're going to see is you're going to see these orbs that are floating here. So those orbs are red. You have to stand on the platform to get the little weak point to hit the orbs. They're throwing, they don't know how to activate them, but you see that one right there just activated with a little weak point, and you'll see this one do the same thing. So here in just a moment, you'll see it activate, and then you hit it, and then whenever all the orbs turn green, the door opens to go into the boss. So there's this platform here, or that pillar there. There's another platform over here and another pillar here. You just basically turn them from red to green. It looks like a pretty simple puzzle to me. I would assume that the puzzles get a little bit more complex as they go. But after that, this door opens up and they go then fight the first boss. So they're here at the first boss. This boss's name is Echidna, or however you say that name. I have no idea, but you can't really get a good feel of how the mechanics work for this fight because they're only in here for a short amount of time. I'm sure that's by design because they don't want to give away the raid mechanics before the raid's actually live, which I can appreciate. But there are some things that we can take note of here. You see these big pillars that pop up from the ground. Somehow you have to mine these things and they go down so that you can access a higher pillar. They do that a little bit later on in the video. There's these other little tentacle things that come out of the ground that have this massive AoE damage that lands. So I'm sure you have to avoid those somehow by being on top of these pillars, but you can't really get a full understanding of what the mechanics are by this video. They only get this boss down by about a bar, and then they tried another attempt after that, and then they ended up just moving on. The developers ended up killing the boss for them so they could move on and see some of the rest of the raid. But here we'll fast forward just a little bit and see if we can find some of the things that are popping out of the ground. So you can attack these things. I'm not sure if you attack them or if you're supposed to leave them on the ground. I have no idea, but these things right here, these obsidian crystals, so they're not tentacles, they're obsidian crystals. You attack them and you can see here, you can jump up on those platforms. No idea exactly what the mechanics are yet, but this raid and this encounter does look pretty in-depth, looks pretty fun. So this is what you can expect from the first boss, Echidna. So after the developers kill this boss, they just move on and they move into the next area of the map. So here they just kind of rush through. It looks like there's a lot of ads that you can kill along the way to the next puzzle, and the developers seemingly just kill the ads for them so they can just kind of move through this very quickly. But there are just a lot of trash mobs and some ads, and you go to this place called the baths where you have to swim across the bath to get to the next area. The next area is the next puzzle area, so it seems it's called the labyrinth. So in the labyrinth, it's obviously a maze that you're going to have to navigate through. And again, we can't really tell a lot of the mechanics here because they don't really figure it out, which I'm sure again is by design. They don't want to give away all this information, but you can see there are like some orbs on the wall there. I think I passed it a little bit, but you can kind of see the orbs on the wall. Those are going to come into play somehow. There's a couple of platforms here you have to stand on, and then you have Medusa chasing you around this entire maze while you're trying to navigate through here and figure out the mechanics. So this should be quite fun. This looks way more in depth than the first puzzle that we've seen, which I was hoping would be the case. We don't get a chance to see the third puzzle because this cuts off after the second boss, but this does look pretty interesting. We have this nice big maze to navigate through with a lot of crazy stuff happening. There's a lot of stuff going on all at once. There's Medusa shooting out stuff at the players. Looks like it does quite a lot of damage. You have to stand on the platforms. I have no idea how you're going to get through this maze, but this looks like quite the challenge. So that should be pretty fun to figure out those mechanics whenever the raid goes live. And then here they move on to the second boss. So we do get to see a little bit about this second boss here. This is Typhon. We can't again get a very good understanding of the mechanics because they only get this boss down by like a bar or two, and then they end the raid. But that's what you can expect from this raid. I just wanted to give you guys a glimpse of what's going on out there. I'll link this video down in the description below. It's 43 minutes long. Feel free to watch it yourself if you want to. It is pretty fun to watch. But that's going to do it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I greatly appreciate it. I hope you guys found this video interesting or useful. If you did, please make sure to like and subscribe. I greatly appreciate that. There's going to be a lot more New World content coming on the channel. That's going to do it for this, boys and girls. I appreciate it. We'll see you in the next one.